manipulation techniques, and rules. This chapter will tell you more about the most basic techniques in emotional manipulation that every NLP learner should know. Not every single one of them will apply to your life, but you will still find something to learn from each of them. Let me give you an example of how this works. Imagine you are in a busy restaurant and some special cuisine is served. You are very happy with the dish, so you ask the waiter to give your compliments to the chef. You do this in front of your colleagues from work at the table. It may seem like a small gesture, but it is small gestures like these that create a personality that people will see you as. It makes you seem classy and respectable, and this is an aura that people want to be around. When we talk about rules in emotional manipulation, this is what we're talking about. You can't simply live life passively, not thinking about any of your choices. In every aspect of NLP, you have to think about how your behavior and words appear from the outside. You have to set rules for yourself about what kinds of things will come out of your mouth and what kind of behaviors people will see you do. Now, this might seem like this is just normal adult behavior. This is a normal part of growing up that you've already done. But the problem here is that you are assuming you have already done everything you can to make sure your behavior is in good shape for NLP. The moment you assume you already are doing the right thing, you will slip up, and your subject will think you are not someone worth listening to. Instead, you need to become like the kind of person we described in the scenario at the beginning of the book. You want people to see you as classy, respectable, smart, articulate, and so on. People aren't going to see you this way simply because this is how you see yourself, or because you tell them you are these things. In real life, just as in stories, we have to show, not tell. We can't simply tell our subjects what to believe about us. They will form their own judgments either way. That means our only option is to convince them we are all of these things by following certain rules we set for ourselves. The rules we set ensure that our subjects get the exact idea of us that we want them to have. When you follow your set rules and your subject knows about this reputation of yours, these techniques will have a much higher success rate. Keep that in mind as you proceed. Our first technique is called visual kinesthetic dissociation. This one is a pretty advanced one, but as far along as you are in our book, you are ready for it. This technique depends on the same understanding of the brain's neural networks that we have already taught you. In short, the visual kinesthetic dissociation technique is when you get your subject to forget about something you don't want them to remember by introducing something new into their mind. The new thing you introduce must have a visual and kinesthetic quality, thus the name visual kinesthetic dissociation. You are causing them to disassociate from the memory and associate instead with the visual or kinesthetic stimulus that should replace it. Here's an example. Let's say your subject is recalling a memory that you don't want them to have. Now, you might even be thinking right now that there isn't a specific memory you want them to let go of, but this is only because you are not thinking tactically enough yet as an emotional manipulator. Remember, the emotional resonances of our memories are the most important things. If your subject has a memory that ties together 1, positive emotions, and 2, the belief and behavior you don't want them to have anymore, this poses a serious problem for you. In fact, it may be outright impossible for you to replace this belief or behavior until you get them to let go of that memory. Of course, getting someone to let go of a memory sounds like a thing of science fiction, but it is possible through this technique. It is because we are not quite getting them to forget it directly. Instead, we are getting them to replace the synaptic links they have of it with something else. It has been a while since we explained, so let's review again how memories form on a neural level. Your neurons form synaptic links between one another when you form new memories. But importantly, they can't just form infinite new connections. They have to forego old connections that aren't being used. Because there is only so much space, even between billions of neurons, this is the neuroscience that allows visual kinesthetic dissociation to work. We are able to introduce a new tactile and optical stimuli that should replace the old memory. They are kinesthetic and visual in particular because these senses are especially memorable. They are the most likely to replace the memory you don't want your subject to have. You are free to try to use other senses to the same end, and it could be a good experiment. But if you want to stay on the safer side, use visual kinesthetic dissociation to get them to forget the memory. The theory for this one is more complicated, but the practice is rather simple. Don't bring up the memory yourself, because you don't want them to reinforce it even further because someone else brought it up. Instead, you have to be ready to use visual kinesthetic dissociation at any time. When the memory does come up, you need to reintroduce visual and kinesthetic senses into their imagination. You also have the option of giving it in real life to their executive functioning network. You could do something like play with a stress ball or look at pretty art while they talk about the memory. You need to do it prominently enough so that they have no choice but to look at it or feel it too. If you do this every time the memory comes up, there is a very good chance they won't have as strong of a memory over time. While this chapter went in depth on an especially helpful technique in advanced emotional manipulation, the next chapter specifically goes into the subject of using your words to emotionally manipulate others. It is what will give you an edge over the other NLP practitioners out there who generally don't focus on their control of language as much as they do their techniques. If you master your words too, you will be an unstoppable force in neuro-linguistic programming.